Hi, I'm Naomi Murphy, and this is the Locked Up Living podcast, where we talk with a wide range of people about harsh aspects of institutional life.
We also explore some of the ways to overcome them and to grow and develop. I'm David Jones. So join us every Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock UK time, for a fresh podcast.
Today we are joined by Nora Stern, who's co-founder of Affinity AI. Nora is a user experience and product professional focusing on the applications of generative conversational AI within the healthcare domain. Her passion lies at the intersection of user experience and AI, where she is using insights gained from both her academic and industry research to inform AI-driven products. She has a PhD in human-computer interaction from UCL London 2022, where she researched how digital mental health apps and chatbots can help people better manage their stress. And before that, she did an MSc in cognitive science and an MA in psychology at the University of Edinburgh. And in 2022, she was awarded an Enterprise Fellowship from the Royal Academy of Engineering. Really great that you could join us today, Nora. Welcome.
Thank you.
And sorry, I should probably also add that I've actually partnered with Affinity AI to offer Affinity AI as a trial to my clients. So I do have some knowledge of the product.
Great. Well, very nice to meet you, Nora. Now, I come into this knowing nothing about the field at all, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about Affinity AI. But I wonder if you could begin by telling us a bit about yourself and how you got into this line of research.
Yeah, so I actually dedicated probably good 11 years of my education and research and industry practice to looking at how we can use technology to scale mental health services. I became very interested in computerized mental health therapy during my undergraduate in psychology, which is what kind of shaped my education, especially my PhD research on looking at how we can take standard therapy approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy and adapt them to conversational interfaces. I feel that a lot of people who are coming into this field, whether it be from a technology background or a psychology background, we all have lived experiences, and so do I. And I guess my educational background, my industry experience, as well as that lived experience is something that really motivated me to build technology that can improve access to mental health.
Thank you. So good, that's really helpful. But now, could you explain in simple terms, what is Affinity AI?
Yeah, so essentially we built Affinity to help therapists deliver more treatment to more people using AI. And we have two offerings. The first one is what we call an AI co-therapist. So it's like a mental health companion for people who are currently undergoing therapy treatment with a human therapist. And what they can do, they can use a companion to text it about their problems, and it's going to help them go through various mental health exercises. The other part of our offering is a therapist platform where the therapist can review the conversations that their patients had with the AI. And they can make informed insights about how should I structure my next therapy session, what did my patient go on during the week. So that's what we offer at Affinity.
Right. So I wonder if you could just go back a bit. So say I'm a therapist. How would I call upon your services?
Yeah, so
what would I...
Once you have access to our platform, you can add the patients that you're currently seeing, and you can use our platform to assign them what we call homework exercises. So in therapy, you usually give your patients homework. And this could be techniques like helping you work through your negative thoughts or helping you address your worries. And AI can do what I would argue a pretty good job at helping guide you through those types of exercises. So as a therapist, you assign them for a specific time, usually in between, when you see your client next. And then you can, as a therapist, log onto our platform and review the type of conversation that the patient had with the AI to see what challenges the patients discussed. How did they get on with the exercise? Did they find it helpful? What was the outcome? And you can bring that into your next therapy session. So that's what it's looking like now.
Right. So I did warn you that it will be a challenge to get me to understand this. So I'm starting as a therapist. So in my background is a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. So probably a slightly different model to what you're referring to, I guess. So would I make a transcript of a conversation with a client and give it to Affinity AI to process?
That's not a service that we offer at the moment. I know other companies do. And I do feel, though, that this is something that can add a lot of value because you, as a therapist, do not, for instance, need to spend a lot of time on making session summary notes, as I'm sure you do after having a session to remind yourself of what happened in that session. But it's not something that we do at Affinity. In fact, we don't even use real client interactions or data to train our AI models.
I wonder if I could perhaps say a little bit about how some of my clients have used it, because that might give more of a flavour. I suppose I conceptualise it as a bit of a mental health coach to support people in between sessions. So they communicate with it via WhatsApp, and it's a little bit like it does feel like chatting to a human being when you use the chat. So I as part of home education, we trialled Affinity AI alongside another voice activated AI, and what was really interesting was there was this the WhatsApp, the chat acknowledges the distress of the person. So somebody might be having a difficult day, be struggling with anxiety, and reach out via the WhatsApp chat to the WhatsApp chatbot. And what comes back is generally a response that acknowledges the distress and difficulty that the person is in, before very, very gently, gradually shifting the perspective to get the person perhaps to think of, to challenge their thinking in order to focus on something that might leave them with a sense of mastery, a time when actually they might have felt similar but managed to overcome the situation. Certainly, I think it really lends itself very well to anyone who's doing CBT and more cognitive behavioural approaches. There's a very easy interface really for those sort of models of therapy, and the kind of homework tasks that you might allocate to somebody in a CBT session. As a therapist, you can encourage the chatbot to nudge the client to engage in a task like focusing on something to be grateful for instance, and encouraging the person to engage with the dialogue. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it goes some way to helping me. Gosh, I didn't realise this was going to be such a difficult conversation for me. So would the client have some direct interaction with Affinity AI, or is it all through the therapist?
It's primarily all through the therapist. We currently do not offer an option for people to just download the app on the App Store. We believe that having a therapist in the loop is really a key component of this being effective.
Okay. So are there specific aspects of therapy that AI is particularly well suited to?
Yes. So In terms of affinity, for instance, I feel that delivering these homework activities in between therapy sessions lend themselves really well for replicating some of that therapist's work. There are other aspects of therapy as well, and I would say they're probably more administrative. And this is something not Affinity does, but I know other, let's say, tech providers do, like summarizing therapy session notes, or even recording therapy sessions and helping you gain insights about what's going on, treatment planning or triaging patients based on various psychological assessments. And I think those are the areas or aspects of therapy that AI can really add a lot of value and, importantly, save a lot of time for clinicians.
Great, that's really helpful. I'm beginning to form an idea. One of my sons works in a mental health centre in Las Vegas, and it begins to sound as if this is just the kind of procedure he should be bringing into the centre there.
Well, the two areas where I thought there really is kind of like potential for this sort of intervention to be useful is in services where the people have quite a high need for support. You know, they might have regular therapy, but actually they might struggle on a daily basis. And so actually you can see how prisons, secure hospitals, you know, that actually it could be really useful for people to have the opportunity to engage with something human sounding, in order to just be gently reminded what skills they do have for coping already. And I think the other area is kind of like addictive behaviours, which might range from drug and alcohol through to people who are trying to, diet or not gamble, all sorts. Because actually, people tend to have weak points during their day. People often feel worse in an evening. That's often when people struggle with cravings. And actually, most services obviously finish at 5 o'clock. But actually, coping with cravings is a way I think that this. I think construing it as a coach rather than a therapist can be a really helpful framework for people to understand what is on offer through the app.
Thank you. So, do you think there are some particular models of therapy that Affinity AI is best matched with?
Yes, definitely. And it all comes down to how structured is that therapeutic approach. So that's why if you look at AI applications in therapy, you'll usually see AI trying to replicate cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, I believe that also approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy can also lend themselves very well to like this kind of conversational AI interface. Funny enough, so does couples therapy as well. You can do a lot of role play with AI or teach people how to express themselves, for instance, like when using I statements and so on, and help them have more effective conversations. So anything that has some kind of structure behind it, it's really, really good. I would say there are psychological approaches where it's not as, as easily applied, like psychodynamic approaches, as you mentioned. I think the human element of it, the human presence in the room is much more important. The ability to connect different thoughts that your client is telling you and make sense of that. I think that's where AI might not be as suitable.
So I can remember, going back several decades, there was a little therapy program which ran on Apple, I think, which was quite fun to use, and of course gave very kind of stereotypical responses. And clearly what you're describing is far in advance of that. But from what you're saying, you're not really expecting this to replace the therapist, but to be complementary to the therapist's activities. Is that right?
Very much so, very much so. I feel that for any kind of digital therapeutic, digital technology to be effective, you need to have the human in the loop. I think it's the therapeutic alliance that drives the engagement with this technology and not the technology itself. It's something where the reason why we actually chose this approach of AI being used as a supplement and not as a replacement is because during my research, especially my PhD research, what I discovered is that 97% of people disengage with mental health apps within the first 30 days of use. But when you're trying to look at, well, actually, what apps do people engage with? And it's those apps that have some kind of human component to them, like messaging or forum, some kind of social community aspect to it. And this is why we made the decision, a very conscious decision, to always have the therapist in the loop, because it's that social contrast between your client and you as a therapist. It's what's going to make people show up, even if that showing up is opening up a WhatsApp on your phone and doing a cognitive restructuring exercise. But having a therapist will make it a lot more likely that you will do that.
You do raise an interesting point there, though, Nora, because I wonder how you keep therapists and clients engaged with it once the novelty's worn off. So I have to say, I offered the opportunity to engage with it to all of my clients, and almost all of them accepted that and were quite keen to engage. But maybe it's partly because I don't work primarily as a CBT therapist, so I don't tend to give homework to people, not structured homework anyway, to people between sessions. So what I've noticed is that there is a bit of a flurry of activity at first, and most people have actually said it's really good. They feel like it's really useful, but they drop off using it. Yeah. And obviously I don't want to be spending lots of time outside of sessions engaged with it on top of doing the sessional work, because that just creates more work for me. Yeah. So I don't know whether you've found a way to overcome that problem, or maybe I'm just not the right individual to be using it in terms of my particular way of practicing.
I think it is $1 million question, I would say, that a lot of companies are trying to answer. It's the classic problem that we see in digital health, where people drop off using digital mental health solutions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's a thing as a therapist who is not suited for using mm-hmm. AI in their mm-hmm. treatment. I think mm-hmm. it's more of a case that we as technology and digital mental health technologists need to answer, mm-hmm. need to work closely with therapists and see how they're using it to solve this issue mm-hmm. of how do we make it useful for therapists without increasing their burden. Because mm-hmm. it's common knowledge that therapists are very overworked. Mm-hmm. And what we need to figure out now is how do we seamlessly integrate this into that clinical practice. And I think the key for this, and this is something that we're working towards at Affinity, is looking how we can, in very efficient ways, not only summarize the information from, let's say, the sessions that your patients had with the AI, but also thinking of, well, how could we bring this into your practice? Maybe at the beginning of a session, opening up the dashboard and looking, oh, you discussed this and that, and almost training you on how to bring this into the session to help guide it mm-hmm. and help understand what your patient was up to between the last time that you saw them and now. So I think that will be the key in keeping the therapist engaged. Another part of it is also thinking about what kind of modes of therapy we would need to use to keep the therapists engaged and motivated to use the tool. I think a big application that we'll be seeing for this technology in the future is having this AI human blended approach, mm-hmm. where we can offer some AI sessions alongside some human sessions to make treatment more affordable. And I think in those cases, we will not see people not using the AI as much as when it's offered just as ad hoc homework. Because now people can think, well, I can do this or I might not. I'm not sure what the value is for me. But if they know that what they're getting is a session with an AI, then a session with a human, and maybe another session with AI, then the benefit is clear. And so we're more likely to see engagement. And I think in those scenarios, we'll see very high engagement with AI, more so than when assigning it as homework.
Thank you. How did you get it to sound so human? I mean, it does sound like you're texting a human being when we tried multiple kind of like personas with different kinds of problems as our mock patients, and yeah, it does sound like you're chatting to a human.
It really is. And I mean, I myself am so impressed with where we have the technology today versus even 4 years ago. I think, David, you mentioned you interacted with one of these conversational AIs, and back in the day in 2019, we had these hard-coded chatbots that could only draw on a limited set of responses, saying, well, can I help you with this? And, oh, that sounds really difficult and not really speaking to what you're saying. But now with the dawn of large language models, what we see is very different. What we see is fantastic. It sounds like a human. It feels like it can really understand you and show empathy. And there are several parts to it. So one of it is to do with the large language models that we build on top of that Affinity. So these models have been trained on thousands and millions of human-produced text. So it can learn how to speak like a human, how to sound like a human, how to express empathy, and so on. But then the next step to that, you need to make it sound like a therapist would sound. And what we did at Affinity is we hired a group of highly vetted psychologists and asked them to train one of these foundational models to sound more like a therapist, to deliver therapy more like they would in their practice. And the result of it is a highly specialized AI that can deliver therapy and sound more like a human therapist.
That's really interesting. So I don't want to name the voice form of AI that I experimented with, but that was also quite good. It sounded very human, but actually it was cheerful and breezy. So it would say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear about that," and then try to quickly chivvy you along in a very upbeat, positive way that just felt like it would totally jar if you're actually really experiencing something that was psychologically painful. But to be fair, the company isn't a company offering therapeutic sorts of services in any way. It is just an AI program, and they were trying to offer AI with empathy, but it did miss the mark. So it was interesting to do that comparison. I wondered what you thought the strengths were of offering some form of therapeutic intervention via AI.
I think the primary strength, I'm just thinking about Affinity, for instance. So the main thing that we're doing now is we're essentially trying to replace worksheets that you would do with your clients in a session or assign them as homework. And before, what we would do, we would ask our therapist to kind of guide us through it and then fill it out in our own time. But there's actually not a lot of information on that worksheet, and it's not very engaging. But what you can do with conversational AI is you can go through it, but you can also ask it questions. So for instance, I remember myself, I really struggled with thought record or cognitive restructuring, where you need to label your thoughts and identify various cognitive distortions. Most people will not know what cognitive distortions we have. with AI, especially this type of generative AI, you can ask it a question, what are cognitive distortions? Or what do you think, based on my responses, what kind of cognitive distortions do you see in my answers? And it can be very educational, very psychoeducational, and it can help me complete that part of the worksheet, whereas otherwise I would have been stuck if it was only pen and paper. So it's really that when you're kind of in the midst of it. Another thing is obviously just providing you support as and when you need it. As someone who's, let's say, a chronic worrier, you need the help there and then. I remember from my conversations with therapists, a lot of them say that their clients would write to them or email them out of hours asking for support. Well, with an AI, they can just open up the WhatsApp that they're chatting on and say that they're worried, and the AI will guide them through things like the worry tree and help them address those worries right when they need it. There are other...
It does seem to be very well suited to anxiety and worry, that kind of like
really
anxious
is,
rumination.
Yeah, it really is. I think that is the primary application of it. I think we're going to see it a lot more in depression as well, or even things like social anxiety. It will be also very interesting to see how it evolves for treating things like OCD and panic disorders and so on. We're not there yet, but I also see a lot of potential there as well.
How do you see it evolving in the sense of, are therapists being complacent in thinking their jobs are secure despite the rapid expansion of AI? Do you see a point where things do change?
Interesting question. Yeah. So
I was asking.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was thinking about, how AI is being used in terms of not just voice and text, but also, facial recognition and picking up on cues that are going on. So potentially, I guess there is the possibility you could be sat in a room with a robot doing the job of a therapist.
In a very distant future, perhaps. But I think that kind of makes me think of, AI will never replace a human therapist. It's difficult to replace some kind of highly qualified professional completely with AI. But what we will see is we'll see AI being integrated more and more into mental health practice. And I think people who think that their way of working will not change because of AI, they're the ones who might be a bit more complacent, because it will change. In psychology, in tech, everywhere, we're going to change our ways of working, and, well, hopefully for the better. It's meant to make us more productive, more effective, prevent burnout.
Do you have any plans to develop kind of like an assessment package? How often when people go for therapy, the initial point might be to do, it could be a screening assessment for particular services, for instance, where you might have quite standard questions. They might be open-ended, but they are quite standard. Do you have plans or risk assessments?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely in our roadmap. Right now we had to start somewhere, so we decided to go for these homework exercises, but yes, and it's in fact not something that's too difficult to replicate, doing assessments via AI, and it provides perhaps a more engaging medium than just filling out the form or having a human on the other line call you up and spend those valuable minutes doing an assessment.
I was wondering, Naomi, whether you'd like to ask question 11, because I think it's probably more of your question than mine, really.
Well, it is, but I think also in a way Nora's already answered it. So I was wondering, I was thinking about the potential for it to grow and develop, but I suppose the edge that human beings, the real edge that human beings have when they're sat in a room is the fact that we pick up on each other's energetic fields. Our heart energy extends 3 meters out from our body, and you sit in a room with someone and you feel their emotional state as well as listen to what they're saying, and it's hard to see how AI would be able to replicate that.
Yeah, and I don't think AI can in the true sense. But I think what we will see happening, and we're already seeing happening in some cases of AI, is that it will create various placebo effects of us sitting in front of someone artificial and thinking or getting the sense that they're human. And that would signal the same signals in our brains that, well, this is a person that I'm speaking with. But it will be up to the person sitting in the room to decide whether they want to experience that or not. But it would be very difficult to replicate it in the true sense. Even in a technological sense, we're still decades away from that.
But there is something very convincing, and actually, people might not have engaged with AI, but anyone who's ever fallen foul of some kind of scam, via the telephone or an email message, or people who've had dates with people that they've met online where they've felt quite, they believed that somebody was something other than who they were. You can. Our mind fills in some of the blanks, doesn't it, when we engage over text, or we receive a text message from someone and we perceive it as either sounding like the person's angry or funny or whatever, but we do project something of our own perspective onto these kind of texts.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to the extent that you project that onto that artificial being. Look at, for instance, the trend that we're seeing about AI partners and AI girlfriends and boyfriends. It's the same effect, and these people get really into it and have this almost like a placebo of thinking, this is a real person that I can feel a connection to. To some extent, we might see that kind of spilling over into therapy, but I think for that to realistically happen with a logical human being, it's going to take years to achieve that. Anything up to then will produce the so-called uncanny valley effect, where it sounds very human, but we'll feel very almost freaked out by it because we'll know that it's an AI.
Thank you.
Yes, it's really interesting you saying that, because I recently had to do one of these online learn how to drive safely lessons, and I had to watch a short video, and it was a young woman, and I had an uncanny feeling about what she was saying. And then very recently something popped up on my Facebook page, which was indeed a company who prepared such videos, such I don't know what you'd call them, really.
AI-generated avatars, yeah.
Avatars, brilliant.
Yeah.
And there was that young woman who'd been talking to me. It was totally uncanny.
Yeah, there's a big,
I think as well you can
around it.
So you can find yourself. I mean, I always find myself saying thank you to the chatbots at the end of, you ask for some help on a website and then say thank you, and I think, why have I said that? I know it's not a person, but there's something about we get lured into social interactions.
Utility in that. There is real utility in that, and hear me out on this one, okay? So remember when I said the way in which we train these models to sound human is by collecting a whole bunch of data from the internet. Now, if we look at interactions on, let's say, forums, you're more likely, just by the way of the kind of social beings we are, you're much more likely to receive a more helpful, positive response if you include something like thank you at the end of your message or whatever interaction that you're having. And these large language models learned that. So I think there's actually academic research showing that you're going to get a higher quality, more helpful response from the AI, like ChatGPT, by saying things and thank you. Yeah, because it's mimicking humans. So, of course, it's going to mimic that kind of behavior.
I'll remember to say hello next time I'm engaged with one of them.
Yeah.
So, Nora, thinking ahead a bit, and how you might plan to develop in the future, you're aware, of course, of the long waiting lists that there are for a range of mental health services. But of course, I'm thinking there are also other groups of people, large groups of people who aren't even on waiting lists. People from impoverished people, disadvantaged people in council estate settings, people from an Afro-Caribbean background, people from a Southern Asian background who are very, very poorly represented in the kind of services they receive. How do you see your project developing into these fields? Do you think there's any scope for bringing something valuable to them?
There's definitely a lot of scope. There are some conflicts between a kind of business perspective and being very altruistic. I think actually, from the more altruistic perspective, that this is an area and a population where this type of technology could make the most impact. And it's actually very well placed to serve underprivileged communities, because you can adapt the AI to sound more like the people that it's serving. You can actually program a specific persona, therapist persona, that can really that people can really resonate with in those types of populations. For Affinity, we are currently in conversations with several charities to make this available. But I feel that there should be more access for companies like Affinity to access these types of sectors and gain opportunities to trial this technology in these charities. So there's a bit of that conundrum on, yes, it can be very applicable, but you need to find roots into that. So that's
yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, really. You need to catch the ear of someone in government, in the manner that Lord Layard promoted CBT across the nation.
Yeah.
So thanks very much for that. And good luck
Thank you.
pursuing that. So do you think your own job is secure from AI?
I think most definitely yes, in the same way as a therapist's job is secure from AI. So when you think of it as a therapist, you might be sitting in a session, listening to your client and thinking, well, you express these challenges. And in my mind, I know all of these different therapeutic approaches and strategies that will be suitable for you in different points in time. So AI can replicate some aspects of what I'm doing, like delivering homework activities in between sessions or summarizing my treatment sessions. But you still need a human to orchestrate all of that treatment planning and what's going to happen. In the same way with me as a technologist, I need to, let's say, know how to program, how to code. And I also need to understand various different technologies available to me. And I know that something like programming can be replicated by an AI, and quite well actually. But you still need a human like me to piece all of the pieces of the puzzle together to create something that's going to be useful and meaningful to people. So I feel quite secure. And I think anyone should who perhaps doesn't become too complacent and think that their ways of working isn't going to change. If we adapt the technologies as they come to us, we should feel very secure in our jobs and grateful for the technological advancements, because it's there to make us more productive, more effective, less burnt out.
Thank you.
So Nora, how can anyone get involved in working with you as a partner?
Yeah, so all you need to do is message me, email me at nora.stern@Affinity AI, and I'll be very happy to give you access to our technology. what we're doing now is we're, of course, trying to provide this technology to as many people as possible, but also trying to learn from mental health professionals and how they're using it, especially to further inform our product on how to seamlessly integrate it into that clinical practice. And yeah, I feel we can add a lot of value to.
And we'll share links to how to contact you in our show notes, and also put the transcript on Substack with links to your LinkedIn and what have you, so people can make contact. So finally, Nora, we always ask people at the end of our conversations, how, we're really interested in how you maintain your own health and well-being. And I think, you can see you just referenced that AI potentially can be useful in terms of taking away some of the burden if you find a way to integrate it within your practice. But what kind of things do you do to maintain your own health and well-being beyond AI?
Beyond AI? I will say, though, that I'm one of those people who practice what they preaches, and I do use AI myself a lot for therapy. And I guess that's because I'm a very problem-oriented person. I need to solve my problems, and for me, AI is probably 60% of my mental well-being and taking care of myself. But outside of that, when I need, let's say, to distract from my problems as opposed to tackling them head on, I love running. It really helps me switch off, gives me motivation to do what I'm doing. I love reading fantasy books, playing video games. I guess I'm your typical computer science nerd, as you would think. Spending time with my baby daughter, so family, going for hikes. I feel like all of these activities that help me switch my mind off. And that's what's making me a lot more productive and relaxed. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nora. It's been really great to talk with you today.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, Naomi and David.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Nora. It's really nice to meet up with you and to find myself being immersed in these highly novel ideas, for me, anyway.
I realise now, David, I should have given you the chance to sign you up as a mock patient so you could have tried it yourself before the conversation.
Yeah, do that.
Yes. Okay.